captioned, Stimulating Growth, Restoring Confidence, The Good Life Beckons. The theme brings to my mind, Mr. Speaker, one of my favorite hymns sung by Jim Reeves, This World Is Not My Home. The words of this hymn offer consolation and hope. Regrettably, Mr. Speaker, the public pronouncements and a thorough examination of the proposed expenditure and policies of the APNU-AFC coalition leave a large section of the Guyanese population in a state of despair and sorrowing state of disappointment. These pronouncements include, 1, the restriction of the importation of used and or reconditioned vehicles to under 8 years old from the date of manufacture to the date of importation. Such a restriction would therefore mean that a single mother who earns a meager salary cannot dream of acquiring a car, as now a car that is younger than 8 years old will be sold at a higher cost. The notice of intent to ban the importation of used tires. What one wonders is whether the APNU-AFC coalition government made any attempts to ascertain the impact this will have on drivers, particularly business persons who use vehicles to transport goods. Amendments to a raft of legislations to increase the fee paid to obtain various licenses, including regulations on the Huskers Licensing and Control Act. An increase to the Huskers licensing would certainly create an additional burden on the small shop owners and the ordinary man who sells his sweets on the streets. The $1,200 addition to the old age pension. What can this do? 3 taxi drops and that money is done. Premise on the foregoing, Mr. Speaker, the good life of which the Honorable Minister of Finance spoke so glowingly about in his budget presentation certainly does not beckon to thousands of Guyanese. For many pensioners, their pension is the only means of survival, and as such, the good life certainly does not beckon with the addition of $1,200 to their old age pension. Neither does the thousands of men and women, young and old, whose income permit them to be able to afford to purchase used vehicles older than 8 years old. Mr. Speaker, the good life certainly does not beckon to the public servants who earn meager salaries and who were anticipating the announcement of a package by the APNU coalition, including, of course, a much-deserved salary increase, not comparable to the increase received by the ministers of the government a few months ago, but a living wage. The good life does not beckon to the countless owners of vehicles, including the pensioners, the taxi drivers, who perhaps will find it difficult to purchase new tires for their vehicles. Mr. Speaker, it is time for us to lift the bar when formulating and implementing policies and programs so that all Guyanese can benefit from the combined energy of a dynamic democracy at work for and on behalf of the people of Guyana as we celebrate our 50th year of independence. I wish to appeal to the Honorable Minister of Finance through you, sir, since it is not too late, to move amendments to increase pension to $25,000 in view of the escalation in the living cost of living, to remove the proposed imposition of the ban on used tires and the restriction on the importation of vehicles 8 years and older, so as to make a reality of the budget theme, stimulating growth, restoring confidence, the good life beckons. Mr. Speaker, I wish to turn my attention to tourism, and in so doing, I would like to take this opportunity to commend the APNU coalition for recognizing the need to continue the policies and programs of the PPPC of eliminating the barriers to tourism growth. These barriers include, but are not restricted or limited to, the absence of well-developed infrastructure, which involve the expansion and improvement of our country's infrastructure. For example, the increase of our airports' capacity, construction and modernization of airports, roads, and tourist facilities. Tourism, Mr. Speaker, has the capacity to become one of Guyana's most economical industry, as it can be a source of billions of dollars in revenue annually. Our landmarks, our monuments, countryside, and our rich culture are magnets for visitors from all over the world. It can clearly be seen that there are still opportunities to grow the sector, making it more productive, competitive, and profitable than it is today. The APNU-AFC coalition government has to work to ensure that we harness the full potentials of this industry, building on the foundation left by the PPPC, while also addressing the weaknesses left in the sector. Mr. Speaker, let us not be euphemistic with buzzwords abounding, such as empowerment of local communities, local participation and control, equitable income distribution, benefits to nature conservation, and biodiversity protection. But let us strive to make it a reality. I would like to use some of my time to focus on the tourism policy. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister of Tourism and Telecommunications, Mrs. Catherine Hughes, in her 2015 budget presentation had this to say, and I quote, "Our APNU-AFC government's commitment and priority to tourism is undoubtedly evidenced by the fact that tourism today is a separate ministry with responsibility for consumer protection, and for the first time in history has been given unwavering focus for this sector to grow as an independent, standalone ministry. Tourism, therefore, is best poised to deliver to this nation on our 2015 budget theme by journeying on a fresh approach to the good life in a green economy." End of quote. One of the concerns which arises from the foregoing statement by the Honorable Minister in reference to the Ministry of Tourism being an independent and standalone ministry is whether we are to assume as Guyanese that the ministry would no longer be poised to deliver to this nation as a result of the telecommunications sector forming part of the Honorable Minister's responsibility. Another concern is whether less priority would be given to tourism. What are the implications for tourism? Perhaps the Honorable Minister, whose portfolio now includes public telecommunications, will be kind enough to tell us what happened to the standalone ministry, which the Honorable Minister had less than a year ago boasted about. Should Guyanese assume that the APNU-AFC coalition wakes up and alter its policies in a capricious manner to suit itself and without any consideration for the populace? Given the huge task ahead to transform this country's tourism sector and tap into its economic riches, wouldn't additional work be too much for the Honorable Minister? In my mind, it is either one or the other. You cannot make it a separate ministry, then all of a sudden want to attach another onto it. And now that the Honorable Minister has the additional responsibility for public telecommunications, I anticipate that the Honorable Minister, during her presentation, will tell this National Assembly when the telecommunication bill will be laid in this House, since all Guyanese are looking forward to the liberalization of the telecommunication sector. The Honorable Minister of Finance on page 28, paragraph 4.37 referred to the revised National Tourism Policy. He stated that, and I quote, "Going forward, the government will develop an operational plan to realize the intent of the recently revised National Tourism Policy, which will lay a foundation for tourism development and ensure collaboration between government and all stakeholders. It will focus on areas such as bird watching, ecotourism, adventure tourism, entertainment and events, and heritage cultural tourism. End of quote. I anticipate that the Honorable Minister of Tourism and Telecommunications, when she delivers her budget presentation, will highlight the policies and programs which will be designed or have been designed to facilitate a participatory approach involving the indigenous people who reside in the hinterland regions. I am hopeful too that the Honorable Minister will inform this National Assembly whether there has been or will be direct discussions or education and practical training or a holistic approach. It is the view of the PPPC that indigenous groups should be empowered to start their own tourist ventures in a small and manageable way. After all, they are the ones who reside in the center of our tourism industry. Permit me, Mr. Speaker, to ask the Honorable Minister of Tourism and Public Telecommunications, through you, sir, whether the revised tourism policy to which the Honorable Minister had referred was laid in this National Assembly, and if so, when it was laid. If it wasn't, is there any intention on the part of the Honorable Minister to do so? I assume, Mr. Speaker, that this revised tourism policy is future-oriented and comprehensive, as it should incorporate the interests of a wide diversity of stakeholders. I wish to turn my attention to another area which requires continued attention. Mr. Speaker, it is indeed true that tourism can provide the stimulus for economic development and growth. The APNU coalition government has recognized this. This is demonstrated with the introduction of a destination management approach and the development of collaborative partnerships, which would allow for better tourism consideration in the planning for public infrastructure. We are aware that adequate infrastructure is critical to delivering a world-class visitor experience and is the platform for private sector investment. I wish to submit, Mr. Speaker, that there is the urgent need to establish a task force on infrastructure development to identify local leisure destinations, wayside facilities, and provision of tourist information centers at major tourist destinations.
Honourable Member, you have 3 minutes remaining.
Mr. Speaker, can I at this point ask for an extension so that she'll have her full 20 minutes as we agreed? Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Member. Honourable Member, you may continue.
Thank you, sir.
You now have 20 minutes to speak.
Wayside amenities are important for passengers and tourists alike. I wish to turn my attention to another area of concern, and that is the safety and security of tourists, which are vital to providing quality tourism. Mr. Speaker, the APNU coalition needs to make a concerted effort towards ensuring the safety and security of tourists in Guyana. I wish to recommend that the coalition considers the establishment of a special tourist police station or a special task force within the Guyana Police Force to ensure the safety and security of tourists. The task force should work in conjunction with the tourism industry and, by extension, the industry to identify and address crime-related concerns. Police representatives should also participate on tourism boards and work with hotels and resorts. Budgetary provision should also be made to train police and private security staff to recognize and address tourist-related safety concerns. They should be aware of what particular crime risks tourists face, what resources are available, and how to access these resources. They should also be prepared in cases of emergencies to help tourists access transportation systems and embassies, high commissions, and consulates, and help them utilize the various criminal justice processes. The Ministry of Tourism should also seek to establish a 24-hour police information counter, installing tourist telephones, and broadcasting precautionary messages at airports. These could be done almost immediately with little or no cost attached. There is also the urgent need to establish a tourist hotline for reporting crimes and related problems that tourists may encounter in our country. Mr. Speaker, tourism industry employees need to be skilled in hotel and catering operations. tour and travel agency services, guiding tours, etc. The Honorable Minister of Tourism and Telecommunications, during our presentation in the 2015 budget debate, referred to the establishment of the hospitality school. Perhaps at the appropriate time, the minister will be kind enough to update the National Assembly and by extension the nation on the progress that has been made with respect to this institution. Mr. Speaker, permit me to remind this National Assembly that the former administration left a work in progress that in the spirit of continuity requires purposeful and focused application of tried and true principles of good governance that over time will engender the confidence among all of our stakeholders in the investment community to feel good about investing their time, energy in the tourism sector. In concluding, Mr. Speaker, I wish to reiterate the following. Tourism provides something extra, which few other industries can offer, an opportunity to showcase our country's great heritage and national assets in a way which does not just delight our visitors, but also improves our everyday quality of life. We need to have a unified parliament, which has the maturity to look at the national interests as opposed to sectorial interests. Let us forget what our parties are. Let us be reminded that we are elected to look after the interests of all the people of this country. So let us do so without fear or favor. Finally, Mr. Speaker, as we celebrate our 50th independence anniversary, I urge all members of this National Assembly to rise to a new political plane where we are able to appreciate that no one party has a monopoly on workable solutions and take on board all practical suggestions and recommendations so that indeed growth can be stimulated, confidence can indeed be restored, and the good life will indeed beckon to all Guyanese. May the spirit of cooperation and independence prevail. May God bless Guyana. I thank you.